party has been traversing a dangerous Arctic environment for several sessions now. They've come across a vast frozen plain covered in layers of snow and permafrost. Tree line in the distance shows some signs of campfire smoke. That is where they're going. That's the settlement they have to reach. The day is growing short. Darkness is coming. Rumbling under the ground snaps them out of their reverie as they were taking in the cold, quiet serenity of their Arctic environment. The ground begins to shake more violently, and up ahead of them, it begins to surge up into a massive mound of snow and cracked, frozen soil. From this rises the writhing head of some great bearded serpent, draconic face framed by long strands of oddly braided and decorated hair. Horns arc back from its head as it continues higher and higher above them. Small but powerful limbs show that this is no mere serpent, but some sort of strange, draconic being. As it writhes around the party, it hisses insults to them in a number of languages until it finds one that they respond to. This is an intelligent beast. Party, not being one to shrink from an encounter, brandishes their weapons and wades into combat. Over the course of the battle, the creature continues to hurl insults. Some of these insults seem to even carry weight, hitting with damaging might, having charming effects. Cold weapons seem to have no effect. At times, the beast will spit forward a gout of searing acid as its saliva seems to drip and burn at the ground, moving around. Over the course of the battle, its thick hide and its scales turn away even the mightiest of blows. Few lucky blows to the beast through magical weapons or for using spells that are fire-based and or binding it allow the party to get the upper hand, and they flee from the creature, narrowly escaping this unknown beast. So today, well, first of all, welcome back to Elf Babe, but today I wanted to go ahead and open up with something a little bit more dramatic. It's a bit off the cuff, so pardon me for the rough spots. But wanted to continue today on the discussion on monster making and how monsters don't have to be complicated to create new and interesting encounters. So in the encounter I just described, and I didn't want to go into too much detail over the combat itself because that would have just drawn out, but the idea was the introduction of the monster and kind of an idea of how it fought. So when you're designing a creature, as I mentioned in the previous videos, a lot of times it's good and it's a good idea to look at what's out there and either reskin it or retheme it. And another idea that you can do in reskinning and retheming is to really change the nature of the creature. So what I kind of described here was more of a traditional kind of Norse dragon. In D&D, they've used the term Linnorm for this, and I believe that's actually drawn from a text source, although I couldn't put a finger on it right now. But the idea of a serpentine dragon rather than sort of the dinosauroid framed dragon that we're used to is something that's shared by a few cultures. Serpents and dragons are almost interchangeable in some of those cultures. The Quetzal from, Quetzalcoatl from Mesoamerican mythologies. You've got the dragons in Asia. There are some Native American spirit snakes that are rather draconic if you pay attention to how they're used in the game. But anyways, so to create a creature like this, what I did was to mash up some concepts that well, actually, let's back up here. Why would I want to do something like this? So first of all, like I mentioned, there are stats for creatures like this in D&D. The Linnorms have been run since 2nd edition, I believe, when they appeared in some dragon articles and then later on in the Monstrous Compendiums. I think they reappeared in some recent works for 5th edition, and they may have even been in 3.5, although I don't know if I have any of those resources myself. So why would I want to create something that's from scratch? Well, first of all, I don't necessarily have those readily available. Maybe as a new DM, you've heard about a creature or you've envisioned throwing a dragon at your party, and you don't want it to be just a dragon. Maybe you want to surprise them with something, and your players are always going to be thrilled when they run into something that they don't know. This is going to be a moment of the unknown for them. It's also going to be a keynote for your campaign, something maybe your campaign has that no other campaign that they have heard of has had before. And so creating an encounter, even if it's reskinned or rethemed from other monsters, is a good way to do this without having to pour through book after book, or hopefully, stumble upon something in an article or online. Don't ignore those options. I mean, finding your monsters online there's nothing wrong with that, but we're talking about creating your own stuff. So what did I do here? So for this Linnorm, I effectively started with a white dragon, but took away the flight capability, no wings, and replaced that with the burrowing ability. I believe I took it from the Bulette. Bulette is how I learned to pronounce it. So the burrowing ability allows it to tunnel around and attack and move in a way that the players won't be able to engage it so easily, just like flying can, although burrowing, in my opinion, is actually a lot more powerful than flying, because the ground is a really great shield against most attacks. In addition, when something is flying, you can see where it's going, whereas burrowing, you're not exactly sure. So in my book, burrowing, point for point, is probably a better attack, a more effective attack than flying. So I gave it burrowing. Now, the other thing I did too is replace the breath weapon with the breath attack of a black dragon instead of a white dragon. White dragons use a cold attack, and this Linnorm still has the cold defense. It's a cold weather creature. I didn't want to rob it of that. That's why in the description of the short little encounter description, cold weapons didn't attack. It didn't affect it. Later on, fire weapons were able to. But the use of the black dragon's acid attack is keeping with some very traditional archetypical dragon aspects. A lot of times dragons are depicted as having venomous saliva or blood that will burn or poison things that it comes in contact with. So a black dragon's acid spit attack is a great substitute for that. It's in the course of combat, it's going to be what you need it to do, what you need it to be. It's going to be a damaging attack, and it's going to keep the party guessing. I mean, they're going to be expecting this is a cold weather creature. It's going to have a cold attack. Seems to be very typical in D&D. Cold creatures have cold attacks, and that becomes a bit tropic, and so you end up with players guessing your monsters. So in this way, they now have a creature that is a cold-based creature, but it is not spewing out cold attacks. So we've got now a acid-spitting cold dragon with no wings that burrows and doesn't fly. It's still intelligent. It's spitting out insults at them. It's talking to them, trying to figure out what they can understand. And what I did here, though, is rethemed those spells as sort of almost like a more traditional sort of bardic sort of naming, secret words kind of magic. I guess one of the most recent and kind of closest things you could come up with would be in Skyrim. You've got the shouts that they have in there. It would be kind of cool. Using words in specific combinations. That's what a spell is, but thematically it's different than, say, wiggling your fingers and throwing out some diamond dust and producing an effect. This dragon is using words, ancient words probably, to hurt and attack the party. So we've got our white dragon with a black dragon attack, the Bulette's burrowing ability. We've got magic abilities that are thrown in. And, these can really just, depending on the age category of dragon you're using, they should have spells available to them anyways. I know 5th edition has kind of lessened the magical nature of dragons compared to some previous editions. That's an easy thing to throw back in. You just say this dragon, it casts like a nth level wizard, and give it appropriate spells on top of what it has. Or because you're creating a monster for use in your game, it doesn't have to be publishable. Remember, if you're creating monsters for your own games, you don't have to worry about whether or not they look good on paper and how they formulate together when somebody's flipping through a book and they're trying to catch their eye. And you're trying to catch their eye with some monster off the page. So for your own games, this could be a little 3x5 with just notes. Young adult, white dragon, black dragon breath weapon, violet burrow. You maybe write down the speed, the speed class for that burrow, the movement rate for that burrowing ability. If you're going to give it any other burrow attacks, like the surprise attack or the swallow or anything like that, note that down. But your hit points and your armor class and your other abilities, your resistances and all that are going to be straight from that white dragon. Now, the rest of this is in, the rest of that encounter relies to a great degree on presentation. You've got, whereas a dragon, in its traditional encounter is going to be something that soars out of the sky, screaming down on the party, defending its territory, or is encountered somewhere in its lair, this Linnorm busts up from the ground. Now, we don't know if the Linnorm has been tracking them. We don't know if the Linnorm was sent to attack them. Maybe the ground they're walking across is its lair. It just sleeps beneath the earth. Mythologies are full of serpent creatures that live and burrow and sleep beneath the earth. Maybe the locals avoid this frozen area, and the Linnorm, because the Linnorm is there, that's why their settlement is off in the tree line where the party could see the smoke trickling up. But the key thing here is that you're presenting this thing in a way that makes it different than a dragon, but it's really playing as a dragon. So your goal here, like I said, would be to present a draconic level encounter without necessarily having to pull out an archetypical dragon. Now, a white dragon would definitely fit into that encounter. You could also use something like a Remoraz or something, which is a big ice worm, that has weird attacks and is dangerous. It's almost dangerous on the same level as some of the lower level dragons. But again, we're talking about creating new and interesting monsters on the fly, on the cuff. And this is an example I wanted to throw out just as something that, I had tinkered together. I actually came up with this idea just for this video, but it is something that, does hark back to some other games I've run when I was using actual Linnorm stats in 2nd edition and for encounters with non-typical dragons. I mean, I think one of the greatest things that they did with things like the Linnorm is present something that fights at the level of a dragon, but it's very much different than the dragons we're used to. So here, you are doing the same thing. You're creating a creature out of nowhere. So that was kind of, the quick build idea I came up with today that I wanted to share, and an idea of how to frame a monstrous encounter with this unique sort of cobbled together style of monster building. This monster build style is going to get you a long way in your games without driving you nuts. Eventually it gets to the point when you've done this enough, and one of the reasons I'm really going to talk about this a lot, and I'm going to share some more examples later on of other things. I mean, there's all sorts of other ideas, hybridizations, things that are variations on a theme. These are all things that I want to talk about in other videos, but right now this is just an example of how to create a dragon that's not the standard dragon, but still is the encounter like the dragon. And again, the reason you're doing this is not to be hip and new and different, although it sort of is, because you're trying to present something new to your players. It's also to keep them guessing and to have something that stands out in your game. Every DM is going to throw dragons at their party. And in this same game as this Linnorm that you create, that we've created here off the cuff, there could be other actual dragons, regular dragons. But they don't have to be exclusive. But you could only use dragons so many times in their standard form before everybody's like, oh, look, a dragon. You know, that's why D&D has things like dracolisks, wyverns, drakes, all sorts of other things that appear like dragons, that have the same character and nature and the same stage presence as a dragon, but without being actually a dragon. So, you know, again, this is going to be a short video, but I wanted to present to you an example of a monster build using some of the stuff I talked to you about in the last video, which is plugging in abilities and interchanging concepts between creatures. Now, one last note: this monster didn't have to be built off of a dragon stat. You could have done a lower level version of this, kind of a lower CR, if you will. Even though I don't really like thinking of things in terms of CR, but you could have built it off of a giant snake as a base, and then given the giant snake the spit attack of the black dragon, and maybe it doesn't have the spell abilities. It still has the burrow of the bulette. You still have the spit attack of the black dragon, and now it's just a big giant snake, which is a hit point sink. This would be a way to do a less magical, more strange Arctic beast version than the draconic version. So that's another way you could have constructed this. So yeah, think about it. Really would love to hear what people are doing in their campaigns to build their own monsters. Certainly, the comment section is great for that. Throw in some examples. Questions on how to build things. I mean, if you have something that you have been trying to think about how to build and you don't know exactly how to do it, throw a comment down below, and I will go ahead and take a look at it. Maybe we can turn it into a video and we can crunch it, or maybe if you prefer, I'll just answer it in the comments. Also, I'd love to hear if any of you are using this information in your games, and or if you have used similar things to this, and just kind of share collectively what it is that we can do to help people who are coming into DMing and may be a bit daunted by the task of creating their own content, their own creatures for their players to encounter. The monster manuals are only so big, and everybody's looked through them 1,000 times, so there's certainly some value in figuring out quick and easy ways on how to create your own creatures. Anyways, this is Eli from Elfbait. Thanking you for tuning in again. Everybody, I hope you come back. Hope you'll comment, like, share, and subscribe, and get out and game.